The music was loud, the wedding glittered, yet my grandson's hand shook in mine. "Grandma," he whispered, eyes wide with terror, "don't you dare look under the table." My breath caught. I lowered my gaze, and what I saw shattered my world in one instant. Thank heavens you're here with me. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of justice and redemption will travel. The night was supposed to be filled with nothing but joy. Crystal chandeliers blazed above us, scattering drops of light across the marble floor. The ballroom smelled of roses and champagne, the kind of fragrance that announces luxury before you even see it. Waiters in pressed black jackets glided between the tables like dancers, balancing silver trays of hors d'oeuvres that glistened in the candlelight. A jazz band in the corner played a slow, velvety tune that made the glasses tremble gently on their saucers. It was the wedding of my son, Daniel, and the whole world around me seemed to be celebrating. I was seated at table 9 in the center of the hall, my hand resting on the small palm of my grandson, Logan. He was only 7 years old, too young to sit through a night of speeches and laughter, too young to pretend he wasn't still grieving his mother. His wooden kaleidoscope, the one he carried everywhere, lay forgotten on the tablecloth, its painted surface glowing under the candle's flame. At first, I thought the boy was just restless. He had been rolling the kaleidoscope back and forth, watching the colors tumble inside. But then his hand clamped down on mine with such force that I nearly dropped my fork. His skin was damp with sweat, though the air conditioning blew cool against our table. I looked down. His eyes were wide, fixed on me, full of an urgency I had never seen in him before. His lips parted, and he whispered in a voice so soft that I had to lean in to hear him. "Grandma, I want to leave right now." The words didn't fit the scene. They didn't belong to a night of white roses and golden chandeliers. My heart stumbled. I bent closer, brushing his hair away from his forehead, trying to steady him. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice calm though my chest was tightening. He swallowed hard, his breath shaky. His small fingers squeezed mine again, and then his words came out in a broken whisper, trembling but sharp enough to pierce through the laughter and music around us. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" Every sound around me, the band, the chatter, the clinking of silverware, seemed to fade. My ears rang with silence. I blinked at him, not sure I had heard correctly, but his eyes told me he was serious, terribly serious. Slowly, with the weight of dread pressing down on me, I lowered my hand toward the white lace tablecloth. My fingers pinched the edge and lifted it, just enough for the candlelight to spill into the shadowy space beneath. At first, I saw nothing unusual. The polished wooden legs of the chairs, Logan's shiny black shoes swinging nervously back and forth, the marble floor reflecting a soft shimmer of gold. But then my eyes caught it, a small object tucked near the base of his chair. A slip of paper, folded neatly into 4. It shouldn't have been there. It didn't belong among the shadows and dust beneath a wedding table. My chest tightened as I reached down, my fingertips brushing the cold floor. I pulled the paper into my lap, and Logan immediately pressed against me, his small body trembling, his breath quick and shallow against my arm. I stared at the paper. It was plain, ordinary, yet it radiated menace, as though the weight of it could shatter the night. Around us, the party swelled louder, glasses clinking, a burst of laughter echoing across the hall. The bride's laughter in particular rang out, high and bright, as if she were the queen of this world. But my world had narrowed to this single folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it, careful not to tear the fragile lines. Inside, scrawled in hurried ink, were words so short, so simple, yet so cruelly precise they made my blood run cold. Table 9. Switch the child's dessert. Add strawberry sauce. Strawberries, the one thing Logan could never touch. The one food that could stop his breathing, close his throat, and take his life in minutes. I froze, the note shook in my hand. A rush of cold spread through my body as if the air itself had turned against me. I looked at my grandson clinging to me, his eyes wide with terror. "Grandma," he whispered again, his voice breaking, "don't let them give me that." I pressed him tightly to my side, the note crumpling in my palm, its sharp edges cutting into my skin. All around us, people laughed, raised their glasses, posed for photographs. The music swelled, cheerful and bright, oblivious to the darkness that had crept beneath our table. But I knew the truth. Someone here, someone in this ballroom of roses and silk wanted to harm my grandson, and I was going to find out who. I sat frozen with that note burning in my palm, my grandson trembling against my arm. For a moment, I didn't breathe. The world had become a blur of music, laughter, and flashing cameras, and yet I felt more alone than I ever had before. But to understand why my heart shook so violently, why the simple mention of strawberries carried the weight of death, you need to know the story of my family. The fragile glass threads that had already been shattered once before. My son Daniel was moving through the crowd with the smile of a man desperate to prove he was happy. He was handsome in his navy suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his shoulders squared as he clinked glasses with relatives. People cheered his name, raised toasts, and congratulated him on a new beginning. They saw only his charm and his success, but I saw the hollowness in his eyes, the shadows he could not hide from me. Once Daniel had known true happiness. Years ago he had married Alina, a woman with a laugh as soft as morning rain. She gave birth to Logan, and in that child's first cries, their little family had been whole. But fate is cruel, and one accident on a highway took Alina from us forever. She left behind a boy of 4 years old and a man who buried his grief in endless hours of work, hiding from the silence of his own home. I stepped in where I was needed. I became not just a grandmother, but a second mother. I was the one who stayed up when Logan's fevers raged through the night. I was the one who taught him to hold his pencil, who kissed his forehead when he woke crying for mother he could barely remember. And in time, I became the one he clung to most, because his father was too lost in sorrow to see clearly. But I was not alone in holding that flame for our family. There was also Mira, my adopted daughter, younger than Daniel by 10 years, with a heart full of warmth. Mira had no obligation to Logan, no blood tie to him, but she loved him as fiercely as if he were her own. She brought coloring books, baked cookies, taught him to read, and never let him feel forgotten. Logan called her Aunt Mira, but I saw how he looked at her with the kind of trust children reserve only for those who make them feel safe. And then came Serena. She was the woman standing in the corner of the ballroom now, radiant in her beaded gown, a glass of champagne always in hand. Her smile was perfect, perfect enough for photographs, perfect enough for everyone to believe she was the answer to Daniel's sorrow. She was elegant, clever, and knew exactly how to charm a room. But I had learned, through years of silence and observation, that perfection is often a mask. Serena's eyes lingered on me too long when she first came into our home. She paused in front of the photograph of Alina hugging a young Logan, her lips curling just slightly as though she couldn't quite hide her contempt. She laughed sweetly, offered to help with the dishes, praised my cooking in a voice too rehearsed to be genuine. Logan never warmed to her. He shrank back when she leaned close, ignored her gifts, turned his face away from her sugared compliments. And though I noticed every detail, I told myself to be quiet. I told myself Daniel deserved happiness. I told myself it was just my heart being too protective, too suspicious. But tonight, this note in my hand proved I had been right to worry. I tightened my grip on Logan, feeling his tiny fingers trembling inside mine. His toy kaleidoscope rolled across the tablecloth, bumping against a silver plate. I caught it and set it gently back before it fell, and in that simple moment I realized what was at stake. The toy, the boy, the life that had been entrusted to me. Someone wanted to harm my grandson, and in a room full of music, champagne, and smiling faces, I would have to figure out who and why. I lifted my eyes across the ballroom, searching. Daniel's smile, Serena's laughter, Mira's worried gaze watching Logan from across the table. Family, friends, strangers, all woven together into this glittering evening. Somewhere among them was the hand that had slipped this note under our table, and I knew before the night was done their mask would fall. The note was still clenched in my palm, its edges pressing against my skin like a blade. My grandson's trembling hand in mine anchored me to the present. But my heart couldn't help drifting back to the years that had led us here, the years that had carved the scars beneath my skin. Once upon a time, before chandeliers and champagne, our family had been whole. I can still see Alina, my late daughter-in-law, standing barefoot in the tiny kitchen of her starter home, her hair falling loose around her face as she stirred a pot of soup. She had the kind of smile that reached her eyes, the kind that wrapped around you like a quilt on a winter night. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she simply radiated peace. I remember visiting on warm Sunday afternoons. The kind where the cicadas hummed outside and the curtains fluttered in the summer breeze. Little Logan, barely old enough to walk, would toddle across the floor, clutching a toy block in each hand, his laughter bubbling like water over stones. Alina would scoop him up, kiss his cheeks, and then set him back down so he could stumble toward Daniel with his tiny arms outstretched. Those were the golden years. A small house, modest furniture. Hand-me-down dishes, but it was filled with laughter. Daniel was a different man then, light in his eyes, laughter in his voice, his arm always around Alina as if he couldn't believe his luck. And then one afternoon everything shattered. The call came while I was washing dishes, soap still on my hands. The voice on the line was cold, rehearsed, the kind of voice that delivers bad news every day. "Mrs. Regina, there's been an accident. I'm so sorry." I don't remember dropping the plate, but I remember the crash as it shattered on the tile. I remember my knees buckling, my breath caught in my throat, and I remember the silence on the other end of the line after the words had been spoken, as if the officer himself couldn't bear to repeat them. Alina was gone, just like that. A truck, a highway, a moment that tore the universe in half. Her funeral was on a day of endless rain. It poured as though the sky itself was grieving with us. I held little Logan in my arms, his small fingers gripping the collar of my coat, his wide eyes darting from face to face, too young to understand. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" he asked, his voice soft, confused. I swallowed my own grief and whispered, "She's in a beautiful place, my love." But inside I was breaking. Daniel collapsed at the graveside, his shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands. From that day forward, he was never the same. He buried himself in his job, leaving home early, returning late as if long hours could fill the void. But work can't heal grief, it only buries it deeper. That left me. I became Logan's world. I was there when the nightmares woke him at midnight. I was there when he refused to eat, staring at the door as if waiting for his mother to walk through it. I told him stories about her, how she sang lullabies, how she cut his apples into stars, how she loved him bigger than the sky. I told those stories through my tears, but I told them anyway because I refused to let her memory fade. And through it all, Mira stood beside me. She had been part of our family for years. My adopted daughter, gentle and steadfast, she never asked for thanks. She simply showed up with coloring books, with cookies, with open arms for Logan. She held him when he cried, she helped with his homework, she made him laugh again. I often caught her watching Daniel when he wasn't looking, her eyes soft, full of something deeper than sibling affection. I never spoke of it aloud, I didn't dare disturb the fragile balance we were clinging to, but I saw it. I saw everything. Our family was fragile glass, cracked but holding. Then came Serena, shiny, dazzling, everything the world would approve of. She entered with perfect smiles and expensive perfume, and Daniel, desperate for light, mistook her glitter for warmth. But Logan saw through her. Children always do. And as I sat in that ballroom clutching the note that could have ended his life, I knew this: we had already lost once. We could not afford to lose again. My eyes rose to the chandelier, its light scattering like shattered glass across the tables. I thought of Alina's smile, of the rain at her funeral, of the nights I held Logan while he cried for his mother. I thought of Mira, her quiet devotion, her unspoken love. And then I looked at Serena, her laughter ringing across the room, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm as if she owned him. A chill swept through me. This family had survived loss, had endured grief, but betrayal. That was a wound of a different kind. And now, staring at the note in my hand, I realized we were about to face it. The folded note still burned in my palm, hidden under the tablecloth. I didn't let go of Logan's hand, not for a second. But as the music swelled and the clinking of glasses filled the air again, I realized something important. This wasn't the first time I had felt the edge of unease. Serena's mask had been slipping long before tonight. I remember the first evening Daniel brought her into our home. She entered in a powder blue dress, her hair curled into perfect waves, her lipstick the shade of soft roses. Her smile was radiant, her compliments effortless. She moved through my kitchen like she belonged there, admiring the framed photographs on the wall. But when her eyes lingered on the picture of Alina cradling a toddler Logan, her smile faltered just for a second. She covered it quickly, praising the daycare, but I saw it. I always see it. At dinner that night, she laughed at every one of Daniel's jokes. She poured his wine with a graceful flick of her wrist. And then she turned to Logan, sliding a chocolate bar from her purse, placing it before him with a flourish. "Here, sweetheart, it's delicious." Logan froze, his little hands tightened around his spoon. He turned his face away, refusing to touch the candy. Daniel frowned, ready to scold him, but I cut in quickly. "He's tired," I said, masking my unease with a smile. "Let him be." That was the first time I saw it, the flicker of fear in Logan's eyes when Serena leaned too close. It didn't stop there. One Saturday morning, Serena arrived unannounced. Daniel was at work. I was in the kitchen stirring chili when I heard her voice from the living room. At first, it was sweet, melodic, coaxing Logan to stack his wooden blocks higher. Then her tone sharpened like a knife. "Stay still, Logan. You're a big boy now. Stop acting like a baby." I froze mid-stir, the wooden spoon trembling in my hand. By the time I stepped into the room, her voice was sugary again. "Look at this tall tower, isn't he clever?" she said, smiling at me as though nothing had happened. Logan's lips were pressed tight, his eyes pleading silently for me to understand. And I did. Another time, she took him to the park. When they returned, she told me with exaggerated excitement how he had laughed on the slide. How he had begged for more ice cream, but Logan's shirt was stained with dirt and his kaleidoscope was missing. He sat silently on the couch, clutching a crumpled napkin as though it were a shield. "Did you have fun, sweetheart?" I asked gently. He nodded, but his eyes never lifted to mine. There were whispers outside our home, too. Logan's teacher stopped me one afternoon after class. She spoke in a careful tone, her eyes clouded with concern. "Mrs. Regina, Logan has been quieter lately, withdrawn. Is something going on at home?" I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe it was just the weight of change. But that evening, on the walk back, Logan tugged on my sleeve, his voice trembling. "Grandma, I don't want to go home when she's there." I knelt in the street, my heart twisting. "Why, sweetheart?" His eyes welled with tears. "Because she doesn't love me." Those words haunted me. They echoed in my chest even now as I sat in the glittering ballroom with the note hidden in my hand. All the little signs, all the things I had chosen to overlook, lined up before me like a trail of broken glass. Serena's mask was beautiful, but it was beginning to crack. And Logan, my precious boy, could feel the sharp edges cutting into him long before the rest of us dared to admit it. I turned my gaze across the ballroom. Serena was standing near the photographer, her jeweled gown sparkling under the lights, her hand resting possessively on Daniel's arm. She laughed loudly, raising her glass, the very image of a woman in control of the night. But beneath the shine, I saw it. A flash in her eyes, a tightening of her smile, and I knew then this wasn't paranoia. This wasn't grief twisting my thoughts. This was real. The mask was cracking, and I was going to see what lay underneath. The ballroom glittered as if nothing in the world could be wrong. Glasses clinked. The band played a lively tune. Serena twirled across the dance floor, her laughter bright as diamonds. To anyone watching, it was a perfect wedding. But beneath our table, clenched tight in my hand, was the note that threatened to shatter everything. I kept my face calm, but inside my pulse thundered in my ears. Logan leaned into me, his small frame trembling, his kaleidoscope clutched against his chest like a shield. He whispered again, barely audible, "Grandma, don't let them give me food tonight, please." I kissed the top of his head, my heart breaking. "I won't, sweetheart, I promise." Then, like a cruel trick, the waiters began to roll in the main courses. The silver trays gleamed under the chandeliers, their covers lifted with a flourish. Plates of roasted chicken, beef tenderloin, and elegant desserts decorated with sauces were placed delicately before the guests. The room hummed with delight at the feast. And then I saw it. At our table, one of the waiters set down a small porcelain plate in front of Logan. It was a dessert, something simple, a custard with bright red sauce drizzled across the top. The sauce shimmered under the lights, its color unmistakable. Strawberry, the very thing written on the note. I felt the air leave my chest. My hands slammed against the edge of the table before I realized what I was doing. The silverware rattled, conversations stopped, heads turned. I pulled the plate away from Logan so quickly the sauce splashed onto my dress. I didn't care, my heart was hammering. My voice, though trembling, cut through the silence. "No, he can't eat this." The elderly couple seated beside us blinked in confusion. "Why not? It looks wonderful." I didn't answer. My eyes darted to the waiter, a young man whose face turned pale the moment he saw the crumpled note I held out before him. "You," my voice rose, sharp with fear and fury. "Who told you to serve this to my grandson?" The room hushed, the music faltered. Serena froze on the dance floor, her smile stiffening. The waiter stammered, his hands trembling so hard the tray nearly slipped. I don't know, ma'am, I just followed the instructions." I thrust the note at him, my hand shaking but firm. "These instructions." His eyes widened, he nodded quickly, shame washing over his face. "Yes, ma'am, that's the paper. A woman slipped it to me earlier, told me to make sure it reached the chef. I must have dropped it near your table." The note trembled between us like a live wire. From across the room, Serena's laugh cracked just for a second before she plastered the smile back on her face. "But I caught it, oh, I caught it." My breath came fast. My hands clenched the note until my knuckles turned white. I looked down at Logan, his wide eyes staring up at me, terrified, pleading. There was no more room for doubt, no more room for silence. Someone in this ballroom had just tried to kill my grandson. I rose from my chair, my voice carrying across the hall with a steadiness I barely felt. "Before anyone touches their food," I said, lifting the paper high above my head, "I have something to reveal." The chandeliers blazed above us, the music died entirely, and the laughter drained from the room. All eyes turned to me, an old woman standing at table 9, holding a trembling child in one arm and a damning note in the other. And for the first time all night, Serena's perfect smile vanished. The ballroom had gone silent, forks hovered midair, champagne glasses trembled in nervous hands. The only sound was the trembling breath of my grandson Logan as he pressed against my side, clutching his kaleidoscope like a talisman. I held the crumpled note high above the table. The ink glistened under the chandelier light, damning in its simplicity. "Table 9, switch the child's dessert, add strawberry sauce." My voice rang out across the hall, steady now, sharper than the crack of glass. "Who wrote this? Who gave this order to poison a child?" Gasps rippled through the guests. Murmurs spread like a wave, fear, disbelief, shock. "Daniel, my son," pushed through the crowd, his face drained of color. "Mom, what is this?" His voice cracked with confusion and fear. I handed him the note. His hands shook as he read the words. His jaw tightened, his lips parted, but no sound came. And then Serena stepped forward. Her gown glittered under the chandeliers, her face a mask of composed outrage. She forced a laugh, high and brittle. "Really? A piece of paper? This is ridiculous, surely. We don't intend to ruin my wedding over a child's imagination." The audacity burned in my chest, but before I could answer, a chair scraped loudly. Mira rose to her feet, her arms wrapped tightly around Logan. Her eyes blazed, her voice trembling with fury she could no longer hold back. "Enough, Serena, stop pretending you wanted to hurt him." Gasps again, all heads turned. Serena's perfect mask cracked, her eyes narrowing as she hissed through clenched teeth. "You're jealous, Mira. You always have been. That's why you're trying to destroy me." But Mira didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her voice cold and clear. "This isn't jealousy. This is about a little boy who almost died tonight because of you." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. The waiter, David, emerged from the corner, pale as ash. His hands trembled as he pointed at the note. "That's the one. She gave it to me. I didn't know what it meant." "I swear I didn't know." A collective gasp filled the hall. All eyes swung back to Serena. Her smile faltered, her face tightening. She turned sharply to David, her voice rising, desperate now. "Lies, he's lying. Someone set me up. Why would I ever hurt a child?" And then another voice broke the silence. From the back of the room, a young woman stood, Gloria, Serena's younger sister. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched the back of a chair. "She's not lying, Serena. You gave me that note. You told me to pass it along. I didn't know what it was for. I swear I didn't know." The ballroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, whispers, a storm of voices rising in disbelief and horror. Serena spun around, her face contorted, her mask ripped away at last. "Shut up, Gloria, you don't know what you're saying." But it was too late. The truth had slipped free, raw and undeniable. Daniel's knees buckled. He staggered back, staring at his bride with wide, horrified eyes. His voice cracked, broken. "You tried to kill my son at our wedding." Serena's painted smile collapsed entirely, replaced by a snarl of desperation. "No, it's all lies. They want to ruin me." I slammed my palm against the table, silencing the chaos. My voice cut through like a blade. "This is not jealousy. This is not a misunderstanding. This is attempted murder." The words echoed, heavy, final. The guests stared at Serena with eyes full of disgust, of betrayal. Some shook their heads, others muttered prayers under their breath. The air was thick with outrage. Serena's lips trembled, her hands clutched the folds of her glittering gown as if she could hold her world together by sheer force. But the mask was gone. The room saw her for what she truly was. Daniel turned away from her, tears streaming down his face. He knelt before Logan, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Son, I'm so sorry. I didn't protect you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. My voice was firm, unyielding. "Better to see the truth tonight than to live a lifetime of lies." The security staff approached quietly, their presence a dark shadow behind Serena. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for someone, anyone to defend her, but no one moved. She was alone. The chandeliers blazed, the cameras clicked, and in the center of it all stood a broken bride with no one left to believe her. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. The chandeliers still blazed, the roses still perfumed the air, the silver cutlery still gleamed, but all of it was drowned in the heavy silence that followed Serena's unmasking. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some whispering, others shaking their heads. The air was thick with shame, outrage, disbelief. Serena had been escorted out, her glittering gown trailing behind her like a torn curtain. Her once perfect smile twisted into fury and denial. She shouted something, accusations, excuses, but no one listened. Her voice faded as the doors closed, leaving only the echo of disgrace. In the center of it all, at table 9, my family sat in ruins. Daniel dropped into a chair, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, the weight of betrayal pressing him down. He had built all his hopes on this woman, his second chance, his new beginning, and she had turned out to be the one who tried to destroy the only pure thing he had left, his son. Logan sat quietly in Mira's lap, clutching his kaleidoscope. His little body trembled with exhaustion, his face pale but his eyes wide and alert, as if still bracing for danger. Mira whispered softly to him, her hand stroking his hair, her presence a steady shield. I stood watching them both. My heart broke for my son, for his blindness, his shattered trust, but even more for the little boy who had endured too much already. Finally, Daniel lifted his face, streaked with tears, and looked at me. His voice was raw, broken. "Mom, I don't know how I let this happen. I should have seen it. I should have protected him. Instead, I brought a monster into his life." I placed my hand firmly on his shoulder. My voice was steady, though my own chest ached. "Love blinds us, Daniel. You wanted so badly to heal. You mistook glitter for light. Don't punish yourself for that. What matters is he's safe. We stopped her in time." Logan's small voice interrupted, trembling but clear. "Daddy, don't cry. I still have you. I still have Grandma. I still have Aunt Mira." The words pierced deeper than any knife. Daniel gathered his son into his arms, holding him close, his tears falling into Logan's hair. "I'll never fail you again," he whispered. "I promise." Mira sat quietly beside them, her arms wrapped around both father and son, as though she belonged there all along. I caught the look in her eyes, the same look I had noticed long ago, the one she tried to hide. Love, fierce, unspoken, patient love. And for the first time I saw Daniel notice it too. The rest of the night blurred. Guests slipped away quietly, their faces grave. Plates of untouched food were cleared, champagne left flat in glasses. The music never returned. Later, when we returned home, the house felt strangely alive despite the silence. Mira prepared tea, her movements calm, but purposeful. Logan curled up on the couch, his kaleidoscope in one hand, his head resting in Mira's lap. Daniel sat nearby, staring at them both with an expression I had not seen in years, softness mixed with regret, mixed with something else. I sat in my old armchair, watching, my heart heavy but full of a strange relief. Serena was gone, the mask had fallen, and though the wounds she left behind would take time to heal, I knew this: we had survived. Our family, battered and bruised, was still standing. And perhaps, just perhaps, something stronger was waiting to be born from the ashes of this broken wedding. The days after the wedding felt like moving through smoke. The phone rang endlessly, relatives calling with questions, neighbors whispering their shock. Some wanted to blame Daniel for being blind. Others wanted every sordid detail about Serena's betrayal. I ignored them all. Inside our home, silence ruled. But it wasn't the heavy silence of grief anymore. It was the fragile quiet of people learning how to breathe again after almost drowning. Daniel carried his guilt heavily. He woke early, took Logan to school, picked him up every afternoon, never letting him out of his sight. Each time their eyes met, I could see the unspoken apology in his gaze. And Logan, wise beyond his years, seemed to understand. He no longer clung to fear, only to his father, his grandmother, and to Mira. It was Mira who healed us most. Every morning she packed Logan's lunch with meticulous care, checking every label twice, drawing little smiley faces on the napkin tucked inside. Logan beamed when he opened his lunchbox. "Aunt Mira, you're the best artist," he would declare, showing his teacher the silly doodle. Every afternoon she took him to the park. I'd watch them from a distance, Mira's hand holding the kite string as Logan laughed, running across the... The sound of his laughter, clear, unguarded, bubbling, was something I thought we had lost forever. Now it returned like sunlight breaking through the clouds. One night when Logan fell sick with a fever, Mira didn't hesitate. She stayed by his bed the entire night, changing damp cloths on his forehead, whispering soft stories about brave little birds who flew through storms and found sunshine on the other side. I stood at the doorway, tears in my eyes, realizing how much she had already become a mother to him in every way that mattered. And then it happened. One quiet evening, as we sat around the dinner table eating pasta I had cooked, Logan looked up suddenly, his kaleidoscope resting beside his plate. His voice was soft but certain. "I want Aunt Mira to be my mommy." The room fell still. Daniel froze, the fork slipping from his hand. Mira's cheeks flushed, her eyes dropping to her plate. I watched as tears gathered in Daniel's eyes, not from sorrow this time, but from something deeper: realization. He reached across the table, took Mira's hand in his trembling one. His voice was husky, full of emotion. You've been here all along, loving him, loving us. I was too blind to see it, but I see it now. Mira shook her head, her eyes wet. I didn't do it for that. I did it because he needed me. Daniel smiled through his tears. That's exactly why you're the one. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart swelling with both relief and gratitude. Alina had been taken from us too soon, but love had found a way to return, quietly, patiently, through Mira's steady devotion. From that day forward, the heaviness began to lift. Logan laughed more. Daniel smiled more. Mira's presence filled the house with warmth, not glittering like Serena's false charm, but glowing steady like a hearth fire on a winter's night. One evening, as I sat by the window watching Logan and Mira fly their kite in the yard, Daniel came to sit beside me. His voice was quiet. Mom, I know I failed, but I don't want to make the same mistake again. I don't care what the world thinks. I just want what's real. I squeezed his hand, my eyes on the kite climbing higher into the sky. True happiness isn't in dazzling gowns or grand weddings. It's in love that proves itself day by day. Don't ever forget that. The kite danced in the breeze, Logan's laughter rising with it. Mira's smile steady as she held the string, and in that moment I knew, though our family bore scars that would never fully fade, we had survived the storm. We had chosen love. And love would carry us forward. Life was never perfect again, but love helped us heal. Scars remind us not of weakness but of survival. Have you ever faced a betrayal that nearly broke you, yet love or courage pulled you through? Share it in the comments. Your words may give strength to someone else. Before you go, please subscribe so you won't miss the next story that could brighten your day. Together, let's build a community of hope, courage, and justice.